Welcome to acTVism Munich. My name is Zan Raza. Today we are joined by Dr. Michael Shermer, the founding publisher of Skeptic Magazine, a monthly columnist for Scientific American, and a presidential fellow at Chapman University, where he also teaches a course called Skepticism 101. He's also the author of numerous best-selling books, the latest being Heavens on Earth, The Scientific Search for the Afterlife, Immortality, and Utopia. Dr. Michael Shermer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start off with your journey. I think it's a great way if our viewers would know how your ideas evolved. When you were young, I read on Wikipedia, and as a skeptic, I'm not sure if it's true, so that's why I'm asking you the question.
Good.
You were a Christian, and you also wanted to study theology in university. Talk about your early life and how your views evolved.
Right. I was a Christian. I wasn't raised religious. My parents were not religious. They weren't anti-religious. That wasn't a thing when I was growing up. But in high school, my friends all got religion. So this was the early 1970s, California. It was the start of the evangelical movement that was getting large and politically activated. And I got engaged with that, and I thought, well, there must be something to it. And if I'm going to do this, I should do it right. So I went to Christian college, Pepperdine University, in Malibu, and I studied theology. And really, I was mostly interested in the ideas, the big ideas. You know, is there a God? You know, where did the universe come from? Do we have free will? What's the origins of morality? And, you know, the Christian theology had answers to these questions that I thought was interesting. And I also wanted to be a college professor. And but to be a college professor, you have to have a PhD, and have a PhD in theology, you have to master Hebrew, Greek, Aramaic, and Latin. And I could barely get through Spanish. I was just not good at foreign languages. And so I switched to psychology, and there I encountered science, you know, the actual methods of science, of running experiments to test a hypothesis. And I thought, oh, wow, this is very different than theology, which is philosophy, which is, you know, thought experiments and arguments based on premises and all this. And this was a different thing. This was like, let's see if something's really true or not by running some kind of an experiment. So I thought, you know, how, if we have something like the resurrection, is it true? How do we know that's true? There's no experiment to run. There's no like control group or something like that. It's just this series of arguments. And when but I still held on to my beliefs until I went to graduate school. And in a graduate school at this university, it was a secular university, so there were no believers, or maybe there were. It just was not important. And there I lost my religion. So I was a Christian for 7 years. And really I lost it I became a Christian overnight, quickly. I lost it very slowly. It was just like over the course of months of just thinking, you know, I don't think I really believe this anymore. Mainly because the arguments weren't that good. It was obvious studying psychology, social psychology, anthropology, sociology, that these beliefs are all constructed based on where you happen to have been born, who your family was, what period of time you were born in, what the cultural influences were, and I couldn't see any reason why my beliefs were any better than any of these other people who believe something different. So I just said, that's it, I'm not a Christian anymore. And I used to wear this little Greek fish, you know, the Hebrew, or the Greek symbols, Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, the little fish, Christian fish. And I just took that off. And thought, I'm a hypocrite wearing this thing. And I didn't make a big deal about, like, now I'm an atheist. I just stopped talking about it. And that was it.
Did you face a sort of a hole, like people that I've talked to told me that once they left religion, they sort of felt like depression, you could say, or they felt like an emptiness, nihilistic. Did you encounter...
Not me. No hole at all. In fact, I was liberated. To me, I felt like now I can really engage the world because it's just me and my mind trying to answer questions about the world using the best tools we have of science, and I could be part of that. So I felt like instead of getting knowledge from on high through some holy book or through prayer, or through some authority, with science, I could run an experiment, which is what I was doing in grad school, running experiments, and thought I can participate in this journey of knowledge, of trying to understand the world. And it's open-ended. Who knows what the answers are going to be? In religion, the answers are already there, and you're just trying to understand the correct answers. In science, that's not the case. It's like, who knows what the answer to that is, and here are some different theories, and let's test them. And to me, I like that. And also, I think it was liberating in the sense that I could engage different people as friends and colleagues and just people to know. Because when you're in the Christian bubble, it's not that you shouldn't befriend non-Christians, but if you're serious about it, you pretty much want to hang out with other Christians, or Jews hang out with Jews, or Muslims hang out with Muslims. That's just kind of the nature of the beast. And I never really liked that much. And as a Christian evangelical, you're supposed to evangelize, go door to door. And I didn't really like doing that. Hi, I'm here to tell you about Jesus. I could tell people didn't like that much. But I pressed on, including to my own family and friends. Hey, let me tell you about Jesus. And they were relieved that I wasn't doing that anymore. So that felt good to be, back in good graces with my family again. But mostly, I felt just liberated.
Let's talk about skepticism. You also teach a course on that at the Chapman University. Could you talk about what it actually means for an individual? What sort of repertoire do you need for that? And also talk about its significance today.
So my course at Chapman is called Skepticism 101, How to Think Like a Scientist. And I'm teaching my students basically critical thinking, how to use reason and science to understand the world and be aware of all the impediments to that, all the cognitive biases like the confirmation bias and the hindsight bias, self-justification bias. These things disrupt our pathway to understanding truth because our brains are not wired to discover truth. Our brains are wired to reinforce what we already believe to be true for other reasons. And these are kind of the things I teach students: how to think, not what to think. And this extrapolates to everybody. So the whole Skeptic Magazine that I publish, skeptic.com, our website, it's dedicated to teaching people how to think. We're not here to tell you what to think about this or that conspiracy or alternative medicine or whatever, but these are the tools we have to figure out if something is true or not. You try it yourself. And so to that extent, it's good for individuals, it's good for society. We all want to live in a world where it's based on reality to the best extent we can understand reality, and not based on authority and dogmatism and mysticism and pseudoscience and all these things that we combat.
You just mentioned that we are not wired for the truth. Can you dig deeper in that?
Yeah, what I mean is that our brains evolved to be more like lawyers than scientists. That is, a lawyer's job is to defend his client to the best of his ability, even if that means selecting evidence only to make him look good and the other side look bad. In science, we're not supposed to do that, but that's what our brains do. So let's say I'm already a Christian or a Muslim or whatever, and I believe these central tenets of my faith. I'm only going to look for evidence to support it. I'm not going to look for evidence that contradicts it, and that's a problem if you want to understand what's true. So the methods of science are designed to go around that process, to say, no, you have to look for the disconfirming evidence and the things that could falsify your theory. And if you don't, somebody else will. And that's the open-endedness of science, the peer review process, the fact that it's a social process where you're not just sitting in a room hatching ideas and deciding which ones are true by yourself. You have to engage with other people and go, I've got this idea of what I think the explanation for this is. Now, let me tell you what my idea is, and you tell me if you think I've gone off the rails. And you go, no, Shermer, you're crazy. That can't be right. All right, let's run an experiment and see which, if your idea or my idea is the better one, or maybe they're both wrong. So that's what science is designed to do, is to get around this human psychology of always wanting to believe what we already believe and look for contradictory evidence.
So what are the limits to skepticism? I've heard some people say, for example, you can be really skeptic, because if you would be one, then every time you would enter a room, you would ask, is this floor stable? Will the ceiling follow me?
Right.
On the other hand, I've heard people say, like, I am so skeptical, I'm always thinking what others are thinking about me, I'm questioning myself. Is this insecurity or skepticism? What would you say is the correct balance that one should have when it comes to skepticism?
Yeah, the rub is to find that balance between being open-minded enough to accept radical new ideas that turn out to be true versus so open-minded that your brains fall out and you believe, every crazy thing. So walking into the room and wondering, is this chair going to hold me up? I don't need to be that skeptical because I've had so much experience with chairs that I know, 99.999% chance it won't collapse. So I don't really need to worry about that. To the point where if this would just be paranoia. You couldn't get out of bed. This would be a mental illness. So you don't want to go that far, but you don't want to just believe everything either. So there's some balance in there. How do you find the balance? It depends on what the claim is, what you're confronting there. Like, I need to know if that's true or not. Then that depends on what the evidence for that particular claim is. So skepticism isn't just like this blanket, I don't believe anything. I believe all sorts of things. I believe the Big Bang theory of the origins of the universe because this is held up for over half a century now with a gazillion experiments and data sets and so on. Theory of evolution, it's true. Germ theory of disease is true. Plate tectonics explains the continents and so on and so on. I mean, there's lots of theories in science that are very well proven. There's others that are not as well proven. There's still others that are speculative, like the multiverse theory or string theory. These things we don't know. What's the explanation for consciousness, the so-called hard problem of consciousness? We don't have a theory that everybody agrees, yep, that's probably the right theory. So to there, you have to keep an open mind. You say, well, okay, let's run some more experiments and let's keep working on that problem.
What do you think about afterlife? I was talking to our cameraman today, and he meant that there is a sort of an afterlife, I think metaphorically more or less, because if you already exist in time and space, you already have left a time code of your existence, and even your memory somehow that you leave behind on this planet kind of exist forever, So is this sort of the afterlife concept, or what do you think about the afterlife?
Yeah, that's the subject of my latest book, Heavens on Earth, in which I deal with all those kinds of theories. So allegorically speaking or metaphorically speaking, when I die, I've left behind not just my kids, so there's some of my DNA still carrying on in the gene pool, so to speak, but also my work, my books, my words, my ideas may still float around in the meme sphere for a lot longer after my body is gone. But that's not what most people mean by immortality. They mean I want to keep going somewhere else after my body is gone and in the grave, that somehow my pattern of information, my consciousness, my point of view self that exists and floats off the brain and goes off into the ether somewhere. That's what most people think of when they think of the afterlife. I'm going somewhere else. And there's no evidence for this. Absolutely none. I've looked at every theory about this. It's not even logically sensible in that way. I mean, what continues on? Where is this soul? There's, we know the brain pretty well. That's where memories are stored, and there's no memories that are going to float off anywhere. The memories are 100% tied to the neural the neural states of synaptic connections between neurons. And we know that when a part of the brain is damaged through stroke or injury or tumors and whatnot, the Alzheimer's, dementia, those memories are gone forever. They're gone. So no brain, no mind, no consciousness, no soul. And so if you want to have this idea that I live on through my work and my kids and so on, that's fine. That's a kind of immortality, but it's not the kind of immortality most people want, and that, I'm afraid, is not available.
Let's talk more about religion. You've uncovered or debunked so many stories and bizarre mysticism. Can you talk about how many religions there are and what kind of makes them all similar or different?
Yeah, this is one of the things I discovered when I was young and still a Christian, and in graduate school for fun. I just took some courses in anthropology, for example, just to see what this was all about. I didn't know much about it. And there I discovered this world of all these other religions. And this was a time when I kind of launched into the kind of study of mythology, Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces and the comparative world mythology and comparative world religions, and it's like, holy crap, there's like 10,000 different religions. There's the major ones, but each of the major ones branches off, and they branch off, and so on. And there's, like thousands of different gods throughout history, tens of thousands of religions for the last 10,000 years, and each one of them claims to have a purchase on the truth, and yet they're contradictory. And they each claim that they're based on this holy book that the creator of the universe wrote. Unfortunately, he wrote many such holy books, and they contradict each other. How are we to tell which is the correct one? Can't. And so to me, that is evidence that humans made God, not vice versa.
Let's move to politics and religion. I find this quite interesting to talk about this, because on the right, or extreme right, one could argue that religion is criticized, but in a way where to hide racism. For example, the AfD here in Germany, the Alternative for Deutschland, criticizes Islam, but leaves out all other religions.
Yeah.
What I'm particularly interested in is the left. Why is it so reluctant to criticize religion? I mean, I think if you're criticizing the economic system, which is a social system, if you're criticizing US wars, shouldn't this be part of criticism as well?
Oh, totally. And the left has lost its mind when it comes to Islam. They're not afraid to criticize religion. If I go after the creationists and I debunk the fundamentalists and I refute the resurrection of Jesus and so on, my left liberal friends are right behind me. Yeah, go, Shermer, go, because it's a bunch of bullshit. Let's nail them. And then if I go, now let's talk about Islam. Oh, no. That's a religion of peace. We must be respectful to our brothers and sisters of that peaceful religion. It's like, wait, why? And I think the answer is because the left and liberalism embraces a kind of openness to other people's cultures that we don't want to go down the pathway of our ancestors centuries ago, where we persecute the Jews, for example. And so this kind of comes on the heels in the 1960s of the realization of how bad the Holocaust was. And look what happens when you target a particular people for their religion. And so we must protect religious freedom. That's true. We absolutely should. People should be free to believe or not whatever they want. But that's different than critiquing the claims of a particular religion, the ideas behind it. So we must make a distinction between critiquing people or attacking people and attacking ideas. We're just interested in the ideas. I don't care who you are personally, as long as you leave me alone and respect my rights. I respect your rights. The freedom for you to swing your arm ends at my nose. Okay, we have to respect each other's freedoms. After that, believe whatever you want, as long as you don't harm other people. Now, that set aside, you can say, hey, Shermer, I think that Muhammad went to heaven on a winged horse or whatever, and I'm like, okay, what's your evidence for that? Let's talk about the historical evidence for this claim, or the resurrection of Jesus, or did David or Moses really exist? Whatever it is, we can talk about that and be as critical as we want. So I think the left has kind of been derailed by this confusion between these two different things, and thinking, well, if I attack your beliefs about the resurrection or Moses or Muhammad, I'm attacking you personally, and of course we're not. And so we have to get over that.
According to my observation, critical thinking, skepticism flourishes with good economic conditions. For example, if we compare countries like Germany or Scandinavian countries where criticism or skepticism levied on religion is much higher than, let's say, Saudi Arabia, where inequality is high, just a few kings control what happens there. In Pakistan, it's the same thing if you go to many countries. So do you think science educators are not doing a good job in connecting economics with critical thinking?
I'm not sure it's an economic issue, because you can find counterexamples to that where, say, poor countries, different poor countries have different levels of religiosity or whatever. Like, a difficult question is why is America so much more religious than Western European countries? Where a century ago, Western European countries were just as religious as we are in America. What happened? after the Second World War, everything changed, and countries like Sweden and Denmark and now Germany's catching up. The figures are almost reversed of what they are in America. In America, 90% of people believe in God. In Sweden, it's like 10% of people believe in God. What happened? Okay, so there's two theories about this. One is that if you have a tight social safety net, but that your government has a tight social safety net and takes care of everybody, universal health care, take care of the poor and handicapped and mentally ill and unemployed and so on, there's nothing left for religion to do. Now, religion was replaced by science centuries ago as the tool for explaining the world. So religion gave that up, but it's still been active for the last 2 centuries of providing social care for people that need help. Manning the soup kitchens and taking care of the homeless and things like that. In America, we still have that problem. There's a lot of homeless people. There's a lot of people that are living in poverty. And so religions are kind of a privatized social safety net. And European countries don't need that because the government does it. So religion has lost its cachet as well as its usefulness. That's one explanation.
So should science educators be more proponents of better governmental systems in foreign countries, or should they talk about this more? For example, Sam Harris talks about a basic income, and this would create the time and space perhaps necessary for critical thinking to flourish. Would you say this is somewhere that science educators have failed?
No, I would say the goal of science educators should be to promote science and critical thinking and reason, and let people get to their non-religious beliefs through that avenue. I think that's a more effective tool than, say, a head-on attack on religion for science educators. Now, if you're a social activist working as a humanist, atheist, whatever, that's a different thing. Like maybe you're a humanist and you're fighting for reproductive rights of women in countries where they don't have those rights like we do in the West. Okay, that's not science education, that's something else. So I think it's kind of a division of labor of who's doing what. So like at Skeptic Magazine, we focus primarily on science and science education. We're not activists in promoting civil rights and women's rights and so on, because that's just not what we do. I'm 100% behind that. I believe it personally. I support humanist groups that do that. But that's just a different activism source.
If we look at the news, the headlines, one could assume that there's more stagnation. We've had ISIS rise in 2015, made major headlines. Donald Trump is making news every day, and there's
hour.
Climate change. The Bulletin for Atomic Scientists just moved the clock, I think, 2 minutes to midnight. Is it moral stagnation? Will human progress? Are you optimistic or are you pessimistic?
Well, I am an optimist. You see, I have the moral arc, moral progress. See, these are arcs that are arching upwards. It's not inevitable, okay? We have to fight for it. We have to work at it every day. There's no force of nature driving us forward, but it's more like a jagged peak, a jagged curve like the global warming curve. It's not like that, it's like this. And so the climate deniers point to the down part. You have to look at the overall trend going up. And so even though we have a little bit of a backsliding with economic nationalism, political populism, authoritarianism, Trump, Brexit, and so on, there's other, so it's sort of 2 steps back, but there's, 3-4 steps forward. So we're being pulled upward, even though there's some few setbacks. But again, it's not like, oh, this is a slide backwards. We're heading back to the reenactment of slavery and taking women's rights away. No, that's not going to happen. But we in little local hotspots, we have to focus on those and get back on track. This too shall pass. I assure you, I'm old enough now to have seen this happen over and over and over again, where everybody panics and like this is the end of the Nixon and then Reagan and then Bush, and just in America, every new cycle of administration changes. I hear this. It's the end of the world. This is it. It's all over. We're marching backwards to the dark ages. No, we're not.
Dr. Michael Shermer, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
And thank you guys for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to donate. Otherwise, we can't produce independent and non-profit news and analysis. My name is Zan Raza. See you next time.